My eyes snapped open to darkness, and a weight on my chest so heavy I could not breathe. For one terrifying second I thought the roof of the outpost had fallen on me. My hands shot up and touched fur. Thick, warm fur, rising and falling with slow breath that was not mine. I was Claire Whitmore, atmospheric engineer, and I had fallen asleep in the creche common room after a 16-hour shift fixing the scrubbers. That was the only clear thought in my head. Everything else was buried under 300 kilograms of alien cub. I tried to move my legs. Nothing happened. Something was lying across them like a fallen tree. I tried my left arm. Pinned. My right arm was free, barely, and when I lifted my head I saw amber eyes staring back at me from a face covered in short golden fur. Oz, the smallest of the three Vashtor cubs, though smallest only meant he was the size of a large dog crossed with a lion. He blinked at me and made a low rumbling sound, then pressed his head harder into my side. "Oz," I whispered, "I need to breathe." He did not move. If anything, he burrowed closer, and I felt the air squeeze out of my lungs in a thin, panicked wheeze. This was the moment I understood something was very wrong. Not with the cubs, with me. My chest ached in a way exhaustion did not explain, and every breath came shorter than the last. I needed to sit up, and I could not. A red light blinked to life on the wall panel across the room. I knew that light. It was the atmospheric alarm, the same system I had spent 16 hours repairing, and it was telling me the oxygen mix in this section of the outpost had started to drop. My scrubber fix had not held. I twisted my neck, ignoring the pain shooting through my ribs, and tried to read the number on the panel through the dim emergency lighting. 18% oxygen. Falling. If it dropped much further, the cubs would be fine. Their species could tolerate thinner air than mine, but I would not last an hour. "Move," I said louder now, pushing against the mountain of fur on my chest. "Please, you have to move." The middle cub, a female named Pell, lifted her head and looked at me with what I can only describe as pure contentment. To her, my struggling probably felt like affection. She let out a soft, chuffing sound and pressed her weight down harder, exactly the opposite of what I needed. I thought about screaming for help, but the guardian, Karn, was on the far side of the outpost checking the perimeter fence, and even if she heard me, it would take her minutes to arrive. Minutes I might not have. My comm bracelet was on my wrist, thankfully free since my right arm was the one not pinned. I twisted it toward my mouth. "Karn," I gasped into the small speaker. "Emergency, common room, oxygen dropping, I am pinned." Static answered me first, then her voice sharp and alert. "Claire, say again." "The scrubber fix failed," I forced out, my vision starting to swim at the edges. "Oxygen at 18% and falling. The cubs are on me. I cannot get free." There was a pause, and in that pause I heard something I had never heard from her before. Fear. "I am 4 minutes away," she said. "Claire, listen to me. You must get them off you. Do not fight them, they will only hold tighter. Speak to them the way you speak to Oz when he is anxious. Calm, slow." 4 minutes. I did not know if I had 4 minutes. I forced my breathing to slow, even though every instinct screamed at me to thrash and push. Panic would only make the cubs cling harder, the way a frightened animal clings to whatever feels safe. I had to become the safest, calmest thing in the room. "Oz," I said softly, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. "Good boy, such a good, brave boy." His ears twitched toward me. "I need you to be brave for me now. Can you sit up, just a little?" He blinked, confused, but the rumbling in his chest slowed. I kept talking, low and even, the same tone Karn used when the cubs got restless during storms. I told him he was strong, that I trusted him, that I needed his help. Slowly, so slowly it felt like watching a mountain decide to move, Oz lifted his head off my ribs. That gave me half a breath more room, and I used it to speak to Pell, whose weight was crushing my legs. Pell, sweet girl, I need you to shift, just to the side. Pell was less convinced. She pressed her nose into my shoulder and made a small, unhappy sound, the sound of a cub who did not want the warm pile to break apart. My vision was starting to darken at the edges now, black creeping in from the corners like ink in water. The oxygen panel blinked again, 16%. I could hear my own heartbeat, too fast, too loud, pounding in my ears louder than my voice. I thought of every trick I had ever read about staying calm under pressure and threw all of it away, because none of it mattered if I passed out before Karn arrived. The third cub, the largest, a male named Doran, had been asleep this entire time with his full weight across my hips. He was the reason I could not move at all, a wall of muscle and fur twice my size. If he did not shift, nothing I said to the other two would matter. Doran, I breathed, barely more than a whisper now, please. He did not stir. I reached my one free hand toward his ear, the softest part of him, the part Karn always touched first when she wanted his attention, and I scratched it as gently as my shaking fingers allowed. His eye opened, one slow, golden eye, studying me with the lazy confidence of something that had never once in its life felt afraid. Air, I managed, I need air. Whether he understood the words or simply felt the desperation in my touch, something in him shifted. He let out a low groaning sound, stretched, and rolled half his body away from mine. It was not much, but it was enough. I dragged in a breath, ragged and painful, and used every last bit of strength in my arms to push myself half upright against Oz, who had finally lifted enough weight for me to move my shoulders. Pell whimpered as the pile broke apart beneath her, confused and a little hurt that her warm nest was disappearing, but she slid off my legs at last. I rolled onto my hands and knees on the cold stone floor, coughing, my lungs burning as they pulled in air that was still too thin. The red panel across the room blinked steadily, 14%. The door burst open and Karn came through it faster than I had ever seen her move, claws skidding on the floor as she took in the scene, 3 confused cubs and 1 human gasping for breath on the ground. Claire, she was at my side in an instant, one massive hand steadying my shoulder without crushing it, a control she had clearly practiced for years. Stay still, I am venting emergency air now. She pressed a small device against the wall panel, and I heard the hiss of a backup canister releasing straight into the room. The air that hit my face was sharp and cold and wonderful, and I pulled it into my lungs in greedy, desperate gulps. The scrubbers, I gasped between breaths. The line I patched, it must have failed under the temperature drop tonight. We will fix the scrubbers, Karn said firmly. Later, breathe first. I did. Slowly, painfully, the black edges retreated from my vision, and the pounding in my ears faded into something more like a normal heartbeat. The oxygen numbers on the panel began to climb, 13, then 15, then 18, as the emergency canister did its work. Around us, the 3 cubs had gone very still, sensing that something serious had happened even if they did not understand what. Oz crept forward on his belly and pressed his nose gently against my hand, a question in his amber eyes. Pell hovered close behind him, and even Doran, usually the laziest of the 3, sat upright and alert, watching me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Worry. They did not know, Karn said quietly, watching her cubs. To them, you were simply sleeping and they wished to be close to you. They could not understand that closeness was the thing harming you. I know, I said, my voice still rough. It is not their fault. I reached out and let Oz press his head into my palm, and this time I did not mind the weight of him leaning against my arm, because I could breathe, and because I understood now that everything he had done, every bit of crushing affection, had come from a place with no malice in it at all. You called for help instead of fighting them, Karn said, studying me with an expression I could not quite read. Many would have panicked, clawed, screamed. That would have frightened them, and frightened cubs do not let go, they hold tighter. I did not have the strength to fight anyway, I admitted. Talking was all I had left. She was quiet for a moment, her tail curling slowly around her feet as she watched me stroke Oz's ear. "That is why they trust you," she said finally. "Even now, gasping for breath, you thought of gentleness before fear. That is rare, Claire, even among my own kind." I did not have an answer for that, so I simply sat there on the cold floor, air finally moving easily through my lungs. 3 enormous predator cubs pressing close around me, not to trap me this time, but because they were worried, and because somewhere in their instincts they understood that something frightening had almost happened to someone they considered theirs. Outside, the alarm light finally turned green, and the hum of the repaired ventilation system rose steady and strong through the walls. I would fix the scrubber line properly tomorrow, and I would be more careful about where I chose to nap. But as Oz leaned his heavy head against my shoulder and let out a long, contented sigh, I found I could not bring myself to regret a single moment of it, not even the part where I very nearly could not breathe. Because on the other side of that fear was a truth I would carry with me for the rest of my life on this outpost. I had been claimed by 3 young predators who had never once, not for a second, intended me any harm. And that, more than anything else that had happened that night, was worth everything it had cost me to learn.